I arrived at the Distillery District venue on the morning of my wedding to find the gate chained shut and the courtyard stone cold. There were no vendors unloading floral arrangements, no rental chairs stacked along the walkway. Nothing. My future mother-in-law had canceled the contract 11 days before and withdrawn our entire $18,000 deposit without ever once picking up the phone to tell me. 160 of my guests were already on their way into the city. What I did in the next 20 minutes ended up in the Financial Post. My name is Lydia, and at 29 years old, I genuinely believed I was about to marry the right person. I had spent 2 years convincing myself that the comments, the raised eyebrows at family dinners, the questions about my neighborhood, the way my future mother-in-law would pause before pronouncing my last name, were just adjustment pains. Not everyone warms up quickly. I was patient. I gave the benefit of the doubt because I had been raised to believe that grace costs you nothing. Standing on that cobblestone in November with my bridal party frozen behind me, holding bouquets that had nowhere to go, I understood that patience had been the most expensive thing I had ever offered. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and if you've ever had to fight for your own dignity in a room that was never meant to include you, hit like and subscribe. This one is for you. The property manager came out from the small side office, a kind woman who had clearly not slept, holding a folder against her chest and already apologizing before she reached the gate. "Miss Tuzan," she said, "I am so sorry. The event was formally canceled 11 days ago. Your future mother-in-law came in person with a notarized authorization form. She was listed as the co-signatory on the financial agreement. She canceled the contract and the full deposit was released to her account the same afternoon." My bridesmaids went silent. My maid of honor reached for my hand. I didn't take it yet. I had let my future mother-in-law be added to that contract because my fiancé had asked me to. He said his mother was traditional, that she liked to feel involved, that it would make the whole planning process smoother. I was a forensic accountant. I understood contracts better than most people understood their own names. I had read the wording 3 times and told myself the risk was negligible because she would never actually use that clause. I had trusted the wrong interpretation of a person. The coordinator kept going. She indicated the wedding was being relocated to the Harrington Club. She said it would be a more intimate ceremony and that the guest list had been adjusted. The Harrington Club. I knew that name the same way you know a bruise before you press it. The Harrington Club was one of the oldest private members' clubs in Rosedale, the kind of institution that had existed for over a century specifically to make people like me feel as though they were perpetually standing outside looking in. My future mother-in-law sat on their events committee. The new guest list, I would confirm within the hour, had been capped at 40 people. All of them my fiancé's colleagues, his firm partners, his family's charity circuit, none of my family, not my parents. Not the titas who had flown in from Vancouver and Winnipeg and Mississauga to be there. Not my Lola who had mailed her best embroidered tablecloth from the Philippines 3 weeks early so it would arrive in time. My phone vibrated. A text from my maid of honor even though she was standing right beside me. "Your Tita Gloria is calling me, the shuttle from the hotel just left." I looked down at my phone for 3 seconds. Then I put it in my pocket and turned back to the coordinator. "Thank you," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." I walked back to the limousine and set my bouquet on the seat. Then I opened my laptop on the hood of the car, the way I had opened it on 1,000 mornings in the office when I was working through something that needed to be dismantled carefully. I called my fiancé. He picked up on the second ring. I could hear people in the background somewhere warm, music playing softly. He had known. I could tell from the very first syllable of his hello. "Why is the venue locked?" I asked. A pause, the kind of pause that is not about choosing words but about choosing how much to admit. "Lydia," he said, "my mother thought, look, the distillery space was always going to be a challenge for parking, and the Harrington offered us something really special on short notice, and our deposit was $18,000, I said. "Who has it?" He exhaled. "She put it toward the Harrington costs. She wanted to cover the difference herself as a gift." The communication got muddled. The $18,000 that my parents had contributed to because they had worked their entire lives to give me the wedding they never had for themselves. That money had been taken and spent on a venue that explicitly did not want my family inside it, and my fiancé was calling it muddled communication. I thought about my father, who drove a delivery truck for 14 years after we first arrived in this country and never once called his exhaustion anything other than a good day. I thought about my mother, who ironed other people's tablecloths at the laundry on Kingston Road and never let me see her cry about it. I thought about how many times I had bitten down on my own irritation when my future mother-in-law made comments about Scarborough. Always with a small smile, always deniable, always calibrated to leave no fingerprints. "The new guest list has 40 people on it," I said. Silence. "My family is on a shuttle bus right now," I said. "My Lola is 81 years old and she has been planning her outfit for this wedding since August. What exactly did you think was going to happen when I arrived and the gate was chained?" "Lydia, I know this isn't ideal." "It is not ideal," I agreed. "Tell me something true. Did you know about this before today?" Another pause, longer. "Mother thought it would be better to present it as done rather than start an argument," he said. I closed the laptop. I looked at my reflection in the limousine window, the small pearl earrings my mother had given me, handed down from her own mother, 30 years old and quietly beautiful, caught the pale light. "I will see you very soon," I said. I ended the call. I did not tell him I had no intention of sending my family back to their hotels. I did not tell him what was already sitting in the folder inside my bag, the folder I had carried with me today specifically because, 8 months ago, when I first saw the name of the Harrington Club on a professional referral list, I had made a very different kind of preparation. My maid of honor appeared at the car door. "What are we doing?" "We are going to the Harrington Club," I said. "Tell the shuttle driver to follow us." I was getting into the car when an SUV pulled up and my future brother-in-law stepped out. He worked in private wealth management on Bay Street and had made it clear from the first dinner we ever shared that he considered me an interesting curiosity at best and a reputational liability at worst. He stood on the cobblestone lane and looked at me in my wedding dress with his arms already crossed. "She sent you to manage this," I said. "It was not a question." "She thought you might create a scene," he said, "which frankly would be a disaster for Adam's career and for the firm. There are senior partners at the Harrington today. This is not the moment for whatever you are planning." He reached into his jacket and produced a check. He set it on the hood of the limousine. $12,000 made out to me. "Take that," he said. "Book somewhere else. The event tonight is 40 people. Your extended family," he gestured toward the shuttle bus that had just rounded the corner, "would find the Harrington uncomfortable anyway. There's no reason to force a situation that doesn't benefit anyone." I looked at the check. I looked at him. There were things I knew about my future brother-in-law that I had not yet chosen to say aloud. In my line of work, you encounter information before the rest of the world does. 8 months prior, I had been engaged as a forensic accounting consultant by the Harrington Club's board of directors after their internal auditors flagged unusual patterns in the member discretionary accounts. The engagement was confidential. My report was not yet public. I had been thorough, because I am always thorough, and what I had found was not only evidence of the club's own financial fragility, it was a pattern of transactions flowing through a shell company registered to my future brother-in-law's private holding firm. I had already filed a suspicious transaction report with FinTrack 3 months ago. I had already been in contact with investigators. I had already been asked to make myself available for a follow-up meeting scheduled by what I had initially taken to be coincidence, for today. I picked up the check. I looked at it for a moment, then I tore it in half. He blinked. I put the halves together and tore them again and set the pieces on the hood of the car. "You are right that I might be uncomfortable at the Harrington," I said. "It is genuinely difficult to enjoy a party at an institution you are currently auditing." I watched something shift behind his eyes, not understanding, not yet, but the beginning of it. I got into the limousine. The shuttle followed us north through the city. I sat in the back and I did not think about my fiancé or about the ruined morning. I thought about my parents' kitchen on a Sunday, the smell of garlic rice, my father reading the Tagalog newspaper in his good chair, my mother's voice carrying from the other room like something steady and permanent. I thought about the number of times I had been told, in various ways and with various degrees of politeness, that I had done remarkably well to get this far, that I should be grateful, that the table I was being invited to sit at was an act of generosity on someone else's part. I had spent my adult life earning things, my accounting designation, my forensic certification, the professional respect of colleagues who had initially assumed, from my last name and my postal code, that I would not last a year. I had earned every credential with my own hours and my own effort, and I had never once asked anyone to lower the bar. What I had not anticipated was that earning everything would still not be enough to make someone's mother look at my family without calculating how quickly they could be rendered invisible. We pulled up to the Harrington as a convoy. My family stepped out into the gray November light dressed beautifully, because that is how my community shows up for each other. My titas in their formal barongs and silk blouses, my cousins in pressed suits, my parents arm in arm, my father in the good jacket that had been hanging in a garment bag since the week I told him the wedding date. The door staff watched us with the particular stillness of people who have been trained never to show anything. I walked in first. The interior of the Harrington was all dark wood and oil portraits, and the kind of quiet that is maintained not by acoustics, but by the collective agreement of everyone inside that certain things are not said above a certain volume. A small string ensemble played near the bar. 40 people with champagne flutes turned to look at us. My future mother-in-law was across the room in a gray silk jacket, her expression moving quickly through shock and into something that wanted to look like measured concern. She crossed toward me and took my arm, pulling me slightly aside the way a person does when they want the performance to appear private but the audience to stay aware. "Lydia," she said quietly, "I understand you're upset, but Adam's partners are standing right there. Please ask your family to wait outside or return to the hotel. I will arrange a car." I looked at her hand on my arm. She released it. "I paid for this wedding," I said. "Or more precisely, my family and I paid for this wedding until you withdrew the deposit we had placed and spent it on this room, and now you are asking my parents to wait on the pavement outside while you entertain Adam's colleagues with their money." "That is not," she began. "I would like to enjoy the reception," I said. "The one we paid for." My fiancé appeared. He looked at the crowd of my family filling the entrance hall, then at me, and I watched him make the calculation I had been hoping he would not make. He made it anyway. He took my elbow, not gently, and steered me a step aside. "You need to stop this," he said under his breath. "These are the people who determine my future. Do you understand what you are doing right now?" "I understand what your mother did to my family," I said. "She was trying to protect us," he said. "The optics of having, Lydia, you know how formal this environment is. Your family is wonderful, but this is not." "Finish that sentence," I said quietly. He didn't, but I saw what he meant in the space where the words should have been. I had let this man talk to me about optics for 2 years. I had smiled through the dinners where his mother discussed neighborhoods the way other people discuss the weather. I had nodded when he explained, in the patient tone he used when he thought I was being oversensitive, that certain environments required certain adjustments and that was simply how things worked. I had adjusted. I had been adjusting so consistently that I had nearly forgotten what it felt like to stand still and occupy exactly the amount of space I actually took up. I pulled my arm free. I walked toward the managing partner, who had been watching us from near the bar. My fiancé said my name behind me. I kept walking. "I apologize for the disruption," I said. I had met this man twice at firm events. He had shaken my hand both times and said my professional reputation preceded me. "I am here today in 2 capacities. The first is as the person who was supposed to be married in this building." He glanced at the dress I had gathered, he said. "The second," I said, opening the folder, "is as the forensic accounting consultant retained by the Harrington Club's board of directors pursuant to an engagement letter signed this past March." I produced the letter. His eyebrows moved. "My mandate was to review 8 years of membership account activity," I said. "I submitted my final report to the board in September. I also filed a suspicious transaction report with FinTrack in August regarding a series of third-party transactions flowing through 12 member accounts into a holding company." My future mother-in-law had drifted close enough to hear. The color left her face in a way that had nothing to do with the November cold outside. "The holding company is registered to a director whose surname is the same as the family currently hosting this event," I said. The managing partner had gone very still. My future brother-in-law appeared at the edge of the group. "Whatever she is saying," he started, his voice tight. "She is a woman whose wedding fell through, and she is using a professional file to—" I have the engagement letter, I said, signed by your club president, whom I am happy to call right now. I have the FinTrack confirmation number. And I have in this folder a summary of the transaction pattern, which I will also be providing this afternoon to the 2 investigators who are scheduled to meet me here at 2 o'clock. Silence. The kind of silence that costs people a great deal of money. You scheduled the meeting here? My fiancé said. He was looking at me as though I were someone he had never actually seen before. The club president suggested it, I said. I didn't know until last week that your mother had booked this room for the same day. I thought about rescheduling. Then I found out about the venue. My future mother-in-law made a sound, not a word, something structural giving way. The managing partner excused himself and stepped away with his phone. His body language over the following minute went from curious to deeply concerned. My future mother-in-law collected herself. She had spent 40 years learning to manage rooms, and she was not prepared to be managed out of one without using every tool remaining to her. You want to discuss what you paid, she said, finding her register again, the one calibrated to carry just far enough. You contributed $9,000, Lydia. My son has carried this relationship financially for 2 years. I have watched you benefit from his family name, his connections, his world. My fiancé failed his professional licensing examination, I said. My voice was not unkind, it was simply accurate. He failed it twice. I paid for his preparation course the 3rd time. I also referred him to the practice group he currently works in, through a colleague of mine who owed me a professional favor. The managing partner who just walked away from this conversation was told, at the time I made that referral, that I was personally vouching for Adam's capabilities. I did all of that because I loved him and I wanted him to succeed. I paused. You suggested I benefited from his network. I wanted to be certain the record was clear about whose network was doing the work. She looked at me. Behind her eyes, something was calculating very rapidly. I did what I did for this family, she said. Adam was never going to reach his potential with the weight of what? I asked. She didn't finish, but my parents were standing 12 feet away, and my father's hand was on my mother's back, and my Lola was sitting in a chair my cousin had found for her, small and upright in her best dress, watching everything with the patience of a woman who had survived things this room could not comprehend. I had spent 2 years worried about whether I was polished enough, quiet enough, adaptable enough to earn a place at this table. I had an entire career built on the ability to see through financial structures deliberately designed to be invisible, and I had not seen that the structure of this relationship had been designed, from the beginning, to make me smaller. I reached into my bag one more time, my personal folder. Inside, it was a printed copy of the wire transfer receipt, the $18,000 that had left the venue's account and arrived in my future mother-in-law's account 11 days ago, before being forwarded to the Harrington's booking department. I had requested it from the venue coordinator that morning, in the car on the way over. The deposit sat commingled with your personal accounts for 11 days before being applied to this booking, I said clearly enough for the nearest guests to hear. That constitutes financial misappropriation under Ontario civil law. I spoke with a litigation solicitor this morning. My future mother-in-law looked at the paper, then she looked at me, then she said to no one in particular in a voice that had lost every careful calibration. I did this for him. I used those funds to secure this day for my son. You cannot blame a mother for protecting what her child has built. It was not a denial. It was an admission dressed as a justification, delivered in front of 40 witnesses, and a forensic accountant trained her entire career to know exactly the difference. The front doors opened. 2 people walked in wearing lanyards I recognized. They had visited my office twice. They scanned the room, found me, and walked over. Mrs. Touzon, one of them said, "Thank you for accommodating the change of location." My future brother-in-law sat down heavily in a chair near the wall. He had stopped speaking entirely. My fiancé came to me. He looked like a version of himself he had never intended anyone to see. "Lydia," he said, "I didn't know about the audit. I didn't know what she was going to do with the deposit. I swear to you." "I believe you," I said. "That is actually the worst part. You didn't know because you had stopped paying attention to what was happening around me. You stopped paying attention a long time ago, and you called it keeping the peace." He started to say something. "You told me to adjust," I said. "You told me that certain environments had certain requirements and that I should understand that and work within it. You told me in this building's parking garage at a dinner 8 months ago that my family would probably be more comfortable somewhere else. You said those things to me, not your mother, you. He had nothing. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about all the times I had made myself smaller in his orbit, believing that if I just took up a little less space, there would be enough room for both of us. There had never been room for both of us. There had only been room for the version of me that caused the least friction with the life he had already chosen. I reached for my left hand. I held the ring for a moment, simple gold band, no excess. I had told him when he proposed that I didn't want anything complicated. I set it on the table beside his untouched champagne glass. I'm not calling off a wedding, I said quietly. The wedding was never quite mine to begin with. I walked back to my family. My maid of honor was already on her phone. My cousin had located the Harrington's events coordinator and was asking, with considerable warmth and a great deal of practicality, whether the private dining room on the upper floor was available, given the afternoon circumstances, and whether the catering team might consider an emergency booking for 160 guests, full payment settled today. The coordinator, a sensible woman who had watched the entire morning unfold with the expression of someone quietly composing a very good story, said she believed that could be arranged. We went upstairs, all of us. My father held my Lola's arm on the staircase and she patted his hand and said something in Tagalog that made him laugh, a real laugh, the kind that fills a stairwell. My tita Gloria had found the audio connection and her phone was already pulling up a playlist. My cousins pushed the long tables against the walls. Someone had called ahead to a Filipino restaurant 3 blocks south on Yonge, and by the time we were settled, trays were arriving, kare-kare and pancit and lechon, hot and fragrant and entirely out of keeping with the Harrington Club's established aesthetic, and not a single person in our group cared even slightly. We danced, we ate. My Lola toasted me with a small glass of wine and said she was proud of me and that the earrings had looked beautiful the whole time, even when I was standing in that cold courtyard, not yet knowing what came next. I learned later, through channels I will not detail here, what unfolded in the rooms below us while we celebrated above. My former brother-in-law was interviewed by the investigators that afternoon and asked not to leave the province pending a full review of the transactions I had flagged. Adam's sister filed for divorce the moment his offshore accounts were frozen. The Harrington's board convened an emergency session. My former mother-in-law left the building that evening and did not return to the club for the better part of a year, by which point her position on the events committee had been quietly dissolved. As for my former fiancé, he called twice in the weeks that followed. I did not answer, not because I was angry. I had stopped being angry somewhere around the time my tita Gloria started dancing, and my Lola leaned over to tell me the tablecloth she'd sent from the Philippines was already set out on the head table and looked exactly as she'd imagined. I did not answer, because there was nothing left in that direction worth walking toward. Some of you watching this will say I should have recognized the signs sooner. You are right, and I know it. I did see some of it. I chose over and over to interpret generously because I had been raised to believe that extending grace it is a form of strength. But grace is not the same thing as surrender, and I had been confusing the two for 2 years without fully admitting it to myself. I am a forensic accountant. My job is to find what has been deliberately hidden. I could read a falsified balance sheet in 20 minutes flat, and I had spent 2 years not reading the structure of my own relationship clearly because I was afraid of what the numbers would show. You cannot audit your way into being valued by people who have already decided you are a problem to be managed. What you can do is know your own worth so completely that when they finally show you who they are, you already have the folder, you already filed the report, and you already know the way to the room upstairs where your whole family is waiting for you, with the food and the music and the kind of love that has never once asked you to be smaller. That is always where I will choose to be. If any part of this story stayed with you, if you have ever been the person they tried to relocate, to downsize, to make less visible, please share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave me a comment below. Your experience matters, and you are never as alone in it as they'd want you to feel.